Hello everyone, my name is JayAgeDee. Welcome to this video. This is gonna be a small podcast about the future upcoming content for Neverwinter, module 14 to be exact, and we're talking about the Ravenloft setting, Curse of Strahd. And with me I have two guests, and I would like to introduce them one of the other. Yoshi, you go first.
Yeah, my name is Yoshi from Neverwinter Uncensored. I'm the administrator there and the main contributor. And yeah, I'm happy to be here on another podcast. I think it's the second one we do together. So very excited to hear what the guys have to say about the Curse of Strahd and D&D lore. Yes, very excited. I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, awesome. Kolat, you?
Hey everyone, this is Kolat Master from the forums, famous from the Daigatsu Scourge Warlock Guide, and also known as the Lord of Memes and the God of Gifts.
Especially the last one, yes. I can assure. All right.
True.
We want to delve a bit into the Ravenloft setting for Dungeons and Dragons and talk a bit about what might be coming to Neverwinter from a lore perspective. And the first question is, why should we talk about this? So where do we get the idea from that we will see the Ravenloft setting in Neverwinter? And to me, it was always like I expected it to come at some point, because it's the only officially released module for the 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons that we haven't seen yet in Neverwinter. Like we did Out of the Abyss with Underdark, we did Tyranny of Dragons, we did Storm King's Thunder, we did Tomb of Annihilation and stuff. But Curse of Strahd is still missing, and it's a bit different from the usual setting that we're experiencing, but it's one of my favorites. And maybe we should give a brief introduction about what players should expect, like what's the overall thematic. And I would like you to start, Kolat, because you played it in 3rd edition, I think.
All right, yeah, so I've been playing pen and paper D&D for, well over 30 years. My first character was like when I was 6 years old. And Ravenloft I played a lot in the 90s and early 2000s in 3rd edition. And specifically, it's a gothic horror setting. And the dimension, if you will, of Ravenloft is like a sentient evil. Like, if you could be in any other setting in D&D, you could be in the Underdark with Dritzdorn, and you could be in Dragonlance with Tassel of Burfoot, and depending on if the Ravenloft dimension like reaches out, like something specifically horrible happens, or let's say you're just like an evil mofo, like the Lord of Badness, that will attract Ravenloft's attention and it will suck you in. And if you're a good person, you're kind of there as fodder for the evil beings. And if you're an evil person, you could be given your own domain within that, which actually happened to a very famous character from Dragonlance, Lord Soth, the Knight of the Black Rose. He was one of the probably most powerful evil guys going. He was a bad guy, killed his wife, betrayed the Knights of Solamnia.
You know,
just not a guy you want to tangle with. You know? Yeah, he's just, he's a Death Knight. I don't know if anyone knows from D&D what a Death Knight is. That is Lord Soth. That is the character it's based on. And in a later edition of Ravenloft, before the 5th edition, he was actually sucked into Strahd, which is the main villain, Ray J?
Oh, yeah, certainly.
Yeah. Like, Lord Strahd is not stereotypical vampire lord, but he shares similarities, with Dracula and a few other famous fictional vampires. But he is, for all intents and purposes, the most famous and most badass of the Lords of Ravenloft. And Soth actually gets sucked into his realm, asks him for help, which is weird because they're both evil. Why would you get help from another evil dude? But hey, I guess it worked. And Strahd tried to manipulate Soth. Soth eventually fought back. And on his way out, he actually got made into his own lord of another dimension within Ravenloft. But if you want to expand a bit more on Strahd itself, Jay, I'll leave that to you. Just the players need to understand that Ravenloft is something that finds you. you do not find Ravenloft.
Yeah, exactly. So in the 5th edition canon, Ravenloft is, or the land of Barovia, is a domain of dread, which occurs, like it starts existing when something horrible happens. And in the 5th edition canon, that's when Strahd becomes the master of his own domain, inside of Barovia, the 5th edition Ravenloft setting. And that is the thing about Strahd being a more traditional vampire is 100% true. He is based on like the old classic Dracula, like Transylvanian horror. He's not one of those new fancy vampires who sparkle in the sun. No, this is a monster. Yeah, he is.
No sparklies.
Yeah, he is a monster, and he will eat you if you're lucky. And still, the thing that still exists in the 5th edition canon, the most current version of Dungeons and Dragons, is yes, he will find you. He will reach like Strahd himself will get you to visit his domain, and he will keep you there. He is the only one who can control who enters or leaves, as this is his domain, and you're trapped there and either have to defeat him or you will live there forever, but most likely you will die. And again, if you're lucky, you will just die. If you're if you're unlucky, he will turn you into something that you will hate for the rest of your unlife.
Like a zombie.
Yeah, or a vampire spawn.
Yeah, vampire. Oh, quick note: Strahd and like the lords of each realm cannot leave. It's like a super prison that they're stuck there. They can't leave, but they have basically real ultimate power within that realm.
Yes, and that is why he keeps bringing in the 5th edition canon. Essentially, he keeps bringing adventurers in, who for him are just playthings. Like, he is just
for fun.
Yeah, just for fun, for shits and giggles. He's just pulling them in, luring them with treasure or adventure, or just straight up abducting them.
Or promises of power, or you can save your loved one by finding this thing that happens to be in my realm of evil.
Yeah, and then he will greet you. He will invite you to his castle and to dinner. But what you don't know yet is that you're the feast, and he will eat you up alive. So
he's very hands-on. Like, he will, like, in the adventure, right, Jay? Like, he will literally be like,
yes.
Hey, how you doing? What's going on? You hungry? I'm hungry. We'll talk.
Well, that's a very good mention, because I do have the adventure in front of me, like the actual source book for the 5th edition, because I am DMing a game of Curse of Strahd for a group of friends at the moment. So I was especially excited when the thought about Ravenloft being the next module came up for Neverwinter. So let's talk a bit about the lands of Ravenloft. I don't know what has changed since the last time you played it, Kolat, but to me there is a huge potential in this setting, especially the lands of Barovia, to appeal for a really good module with lots of possibilities for this time, maybe finally interesting horror encounters or skirmishes, dungeons, and so on. So
there's a lot. Like, one thing to note is that it's not just like vampire and zombies and skeletons and stuff. Like, there's a lot of lycanthropy running around, werewolves, were-rats, were-everything for all intents and purposes. So that's something to keep. Maybe you'll see like actual like they have in the what's the dungeon that has the werewolves?
Grey Wolf Den?
Grey Wolf
Den.
Yes.
Duh. But these are more badass werewolves, as opposed to like mystically transforming in, like they use their spirit totem. These are werewolves that are like afflicted by disease.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll see a new debilitated effect. Yeah, curse of sorts. Yep.
So that's the thing. It's not just, okay, this is just a land with nothing, just filled with vampires and zombies. No, this is an actual land. There's people who are living there. They've been enslaved.
Grow up and die.
Yeah,
Yep.
they've been enslaved by Strahd for centuries and have all of the hope just sucked away from them. They're just miserable, and players will get to experience that. Players will get to explore that, and I would like to talk about like specific locations that I think are really interesting. I actually don't know if they are canonical in the 3rd edition of Dungeons and Dragons that you played, Kolat, because I think if Neverwinter will do something, it will be based on the most current product in the Ravenloft line, which is Curse of Strahd for 5th edition. It was released 2016.
It makes sense.
Yeah. So let's start with the village of Barovia, the first, the first thing that you really encounter when you enter Strahd's domain. Was it that way also back then?
Barovia was the main town,
yes.
Not only real area. It was like set in like a valley within the mountains and stuff. Like his realm, it's weird. Like if you look at it, if you could look at it from like Eagle's perspective, it's not like large, but when you start wandering, like the forest in theory can go on not forever, but for very much longer than it would appear. So there's a lot to explore, and there's lots of denizens within it. But Barovia was the main town.
Yeah, the first one, the first small town you get into. And one thing that I'm sorry that I did not mention is the frontiers of his realm, the mists of Ravenloft, which is a very prominent feature in the campaign. Essentially, the entire domain is surrounded by a wall of mist that if you will go into it, it will choke you to death. And I want them to recreate the horror setting, the atmosphere of the mists and the despair of this realm. I want them to do that, and I think they did a fine job with the aesthetics of Mod 12 and the jungle. And I'm really looking forward to seeing them do the same thing with Curse of Strahd.
You know, it'd be really cool if they have like a skirmish, like the length of like, I don't know, Shores of Turin or Castle Spheres of Annihilation, where behind you the mist is coming.
Oh, that would
and
be fun.
You have to clear out the enemies or solve a puzzle or something by it gets to you, and if he does reach you and engulf you, like you die. Like you have to, like a TPK, total party kill. You have to restart. That would be a really cool mechanic. Or maybe even the map itself, the border, instead of having like the invisible walls, it's like, sure, you can go in as far as you want. You're gonna die, but it's just mist.
Yeah, that's exactly how I want them to do this. Like,
that'd be badass.
This time it actually makes sense for there to be an actual restricting wall around an area, because those are the mists you can't get through. Okay, so I think the town of Barovia will be the sort of where stuff is, where you can like the city. Neon. That's gonna be it's the first town that you enter. It's gonna be the hub for the adventure zone, and there's a couple of points of interest. Well, maybe the like the mayor's mansion, or the tavern, but all in all, it's actually a town that is almost, I would say, it only has half the population it could hold, because the other houses are just desecrated. Like they're people have died who lived in there.
It's not happy.
No,
like it's just like there's no, like you don't just walk in and see children playing. You know, it's like, oh no, everything is like morbid and down. These people are beaten. They know they're trapped. They know their fate is to suffer through a terrible life and eventually die. And if they're lucky, they'll die naturally. Like literally, that's if they're lucky.
Yeah. And the only thing keeping them sort of in their daily life is wine. Drinking copious amounts of wine from the only winery in the entire land. But funny, you mentioned children, because the next sort of, I wouldn't exactly call it point of interest, but the next bigger place that players in the module might encounter is the old bone grinder, which is an old windmill. Was that back then in the 3rd edition?
I don't distinctly remember if it was, but I know something similar had occurred when I had played it. But we're going back like 15 years for that. It sounds familiar, but if you want to expand upon it, feel free.
Because like children is a fitting talking point for that, because that windmill is inhabited by 3 night hags who build a night hag coven.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and they're doing some fucked up shit. Like they're kidnapping children and eating them and baking their bones into pies, into dream pastries. And with that dream pastry,
come on!
Dude.
These poor people.
It's not a happy place. That's just that's one of the.
And this reminds me of that one movie with what's the name? With the barber, the guy that has that barber shop and then makes pastries out of his clients.
Oh, Sweeney Todd.
Yes, Sweeney Todd. Okay, it's completely unrelated, but
yeah,
just reminded me of the movie.
Yeah, and this is one of the first things you encounter, like in the module. That this is where it starts, and that those night hags are sometimes even okay. So the dream pastries, if an adult eats them, they get put in. It's a drug trip essentially, and they get to escape Strahd's dread for a couple of hours. And some of the adults are so addicted and so desperate that they will actually trade in their children for more dream pastries. Yeah. And the hags are doing this on purpose, which is one of the things hags do, like make people miserable. That's like one of the main things they do. And I think
eat your child. Have a nice day.
Yeah. And I think, especially the old bone grinder, like that windmill, I would want to see either as like a story quest or as a heroic encounter or whatever. Like that's one of the things that's that should be in there. So let's talk about the Vistani.
The traveling gypsy.
Yes, the traveling folk. So there are people in Barovia, in Strahd's domain, who appear to be able to travel through the mists and enter and leave the domain as they please. Mm-hmm. Which is because at some point Strahd promised them free entry and no harm.
Passage.
Yeah, free passage through his domain, and they use that. Like they are at home in his domain, but they enter and leave as they wish, and they are the only really happy people in his domain. Strahd himself is not happy; he's also trapped, and the Vistani are the only joy that you will probably find in Barovia. But as all things, not really, because some of them are also doing some, because they're not allied with the humans who live there.
Correct.
No.
They're like their own kind of race that's Denzian of the Ravenloft setting, I suppose, right?
They're isolating themselves from regular Barovians because they actually do not like the regular people who live there. They don't have much in common.
Yeah.
And one of those Vistani is Madame Eva. An NPC players will meet very early into the campaign. Once they enter, it's there's a Vistani camp behind the village of Barovia. And Madame Eva will read the future of the player party. And in 5th edition, it is set up in a way that there are 5 cards read as a put out for the players. And at random, chosen from a deck, like drawn from a deck.
Right.
And those cards determine the locations of 3 magic items, like 3 powerful artifact magic items. That will help the party against Strahd. One of the 4th card will determine an NPC ally, which I don't know how they would do it in Neverwinter. And the 5th card will determine where you will find Strahd and where you will have to defeat him, like the place of the final battle. And I don't think they can actually make it random and make it different for every player. But I think
that would be cool.
It would be amazing. I don't actually think they have the capacity to do this.
Well, maybe it could be similar to the Illusion's Gambit, where it's like, or a dungeon where it's like, okay, we read the cards and there's like 5 different variations. If you get this variation, this is the path you have to go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I could see them trying to implement that a similar mechanic, but I want them to in the story quests. I want them to give us this card reading, because it's one of the, not just have Madame Eva as an NPC. I want them to
actually have
let players
that iconic thing happen.
Yeah, because it's one of the main things about this module, that your fate is determined. Like, this is how it will play out, and you can try to fight that, but then you will not succeed in your fight against Strahd.
Right.
So
she always appears as an old crone, right?
Yeah, well, I've read this thing with Madame Eva and the card reading as well, and I don't want to disappoint you, but the first thing that actually came to my mind was that, well, okay, this screams dailies. So you have Madame Eva, it's your main contact, and she lays cards for you and then sends adventurers out to seek artifacts to destroy Strahd. And that was actually the first thing that came to my mind. Okay, so they don't actually have to do too much to convert this into a new campaign with lots of dailies, kill and fetch quests.
Right.
I would love to I would love to have some like intriguing element, like Kolat said, with maybe a skirmish with different variants. But I can also see that this is just turned into daily and weekly missions, because quite frankly, it wouldn't make sense.
Well, I guess they could do that, but in theory, you will only give them like, you only have to do 3 things for her, like, but not even for her, but for yourself. You only have to find 3 things, 3 artifacts.
Only, it's nice and easy. It's not going to take very long.
Yeah, I could see them trying to set up the dailies this way, which I wouldn't mind too much, because at some point they will set up dailies. That's not something that's not something that shouldn't surprise us. What else is in there? Like, what else do we want to see happening throughout the story that leads to the new the new piece of endgame content? What else is there that we want to see?
I want to see some fucked up shit. Like, like how you're describing, with like the children being part of the pies. Like, I want that explicit. I want to convey that this is the worst place you could possibly be, in the sense of you may be in control of your actions, but everything around you is messed up. I want as much of the horror feel as possible.
Oh yeah. So there's 3 villages in Barovia. Like, okay, so in Strahd's domain, one is the village of Barovia, one is Vallaki, one is Kresk, and those are sort of the only sort of safe havens, not really, but more than the wilderness, because
there's areas you can go to not die immediately, I guess.
Yeah. At least not in broad daylight. And the areas around that, like outside of town, are just completely dangerous. Like, you do not go there. Like, regular people don't ever leave their village. And that's something that players will also have to deal with, because I think the wilderness, it shouldn't be as annoying as the jungle in the Ocean Star, but I do want there to be feeling like, okay, you are all out alone in a land of horror, and terrible things happen here. Like, I want the land itself to tell a story of that.
Oh, what would be really cool is if, like, the sound or music that they have for the main zone is like kind of like more background noise, if that makes sense, but like periodically pierced by maybe like a child laughing or someone screaming or like random sounds.
There has to be a wolf howling in the distance, and an owl, and a crow, definitely. And
the call of the raven and stuff like that. That'd be badass.
100%. So let's talk about Strahd, because he's not Count Strahd von Zarovich, a vampire lord. is not a villain that hides until the last encounter.
Mm-hmm.
He's no a Serarak who hides behind minions and toys with people from afar. He will pay you visits. He will terrorize any adventuring party that ventures into his lands. And
yeah,
how do we
He's
want?
not like
how do you want him to be? How do we want him to feel like when you encounter him?
Well, he's gonna be like human size. He's not like gigantic. But I would really like to see the change between like the elegant, charismatic vampire and then the bestial, where the fangs are out and like kind of hulks out. Like that would be a cool change somehow definitive.
He drops the mask essentially. He quits
and becomes
pretending
the beast
and
within.
And he lets loose. Yeah.
The bloodlust when he's overcome by that.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely want to see him in Castle Ravenloft. Y'all think Castle Neverwinter or Never it was bad? Yeah. Castle Never ain't got nothing in Castle Ravenloft.
Yeah. Which is what we expect should be the final dungeon of this module. It's his castle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. He will at some point invite the players to dine with him. With him intending the players to be the feast. And he will actually allow players to enter his castle, and then the players have to wander around and find him.
Yeah, I think it's important that people understand that Strahd is like, for the most part, like he's been there for a long time, like time in numeral, and he's bored. Like part of letting people come in is that he wants a challenge. Like he's not necessarily, maybe, psychologically a part of him is like, I'm a bad person, I need someone to kill me. Wah. But for the most part, he wants people to bring in and challenge him so that he can actually enjoy the fight leading up to his meal.
Yes, he wants to destroy people. Like that's what he does. Yep. He does not only want to kill them, he wants to terrorize them. And I want Strahd to appear.
But isn't part of the story also that he's kind of also searching for replacements so he can leave his domain? So he's trying to search for someone to take his place?
Yes.
Or
he wants to entrap someone for sure. But to do that, I think he has to find someone as evil as him. Kind of. I think that's where he was like, how I mentioned like at the very beginning, Lord Soth came in. Like that was part of his intent there of using him, was to hopefully encapsulate and entrap him in his domain, which I hope for 14B that Lord Soth appears, because I love Lord Soth the best.
So it is touched upon in the actual source book, 4th edition, that he is seeking for someone to replace him. But it is mentioned that in the end, he does not deem anybody worthy. In the end, he is still the egoistic, power-hungry monster that he is and always was, even before being transformed into vampire.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I think, where we should talk about how did he become the Master of Ravenloft. I do not know how it was in the 3rd edition canon, but the current version goes something like this. Back when the lands of Barovia were just part of the regular world, Strahd von Zarovich came in with his army. Back then he was a human, with his under the command of his father, King Barov, to conquer the lands. He named the lands after his father, Barovia, and the castle after his mother, who was called Ravenovia. And he was a conqueror. He was a warrior, and he led his troops into battle. Once he had won, he was kind of restless, and he was sitting in Castle Ravenloft with his brother, Sergei, and his brother's would-be wife, Tatiana. Problem is...
Oh, poor Sergei.
Yeah. He fell in love with Tatiana, and he could not stand that it would be Sergei who would marry her. And over the course of the years, he was corrupted by the dark powers that haunt this land. And He was promised power. He was promised Tatiana. And in the night before the wedding, he confronted them. He murdered Sergei in a bloody massacre. And Tatiana couldn't stand it. And it couldn't stand what Strahd had done to her lover. And threw herself off the castle walls and died.
Mm-hmm.
And that is Strahd's origin story. That is when he became the bitter and brutal and ruthless vampire lord of this land.
That matches well with the earlier version, though. I think there's like a quote unquote contention that I mean, at least, and this is D&D theory, so bear with it. That's when he flipped into and became changed into a vampire based on the evil act that he had committed,
yes,
and the powers that seeped into Barovia, which tore it apart into Ravenloft. Is Strahd the original vampire? Like, is he the father of all? So there's some, like, I knew in the campaign that we were running, I've played in Ravenloft multiple times back in 3rd edition, but in one of them, the guy was like, when we killed Strahd at the sacrifice of like 2/3 of the party, all other vampires in the D&D verse, at least in our D&D verse, ceased to exist. Like, they just crumbled. So that was a interesting side effect. I don't know if that's explored at all in 5th edition at all.
Sort of, you go back to the first one and it takes out the following ones because
right, exactly.
Okay, yeah. I don't know if that's. I don't think that is the case in 5th edition canon. But it might have been something that was in 3rd edition, or that your DM thought would be cool. I don't know.
Yeah, it was more the DM thing. I just didn't know if that was actually ever touched upon, because his act wasn't, the stereotypical, I got bit by a vampire, I lived. It's like, no, I murdered my brother on his wedding, on the night of wedding eve.
Yeah, that's the thing. He was not bitten. It was not a traditional way. It was a It was a procedure. It was not. It was a process. He was not.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't turn evil like one day to the other. He was corrupted, and once he fulfilled his evil deed, he was made a vampire.
He was rewarded.
Yeah, with power. And
he's got power.
Yeah, he does. So, talking about his powers, what do we expect? The fight, like the final confrontation of this module, what do we expect it to be like? Like, what does Strahd do?
One thing I would really think cool if it came in is that any source of radiant damage does like X percentage more to him specifically, because I know, like, in 3rd edition, I believe you had mentioned 5th edition, previous to the podcast, that radiant damage is very important in defeating him because it prevents him from mechanically healing. So I would also like to see some sort of the damage like a lifesteal effect for him.
Yeah, exactly. Because in mechanically, Strahd regenerates hit points every turn. He has a passive self heal unless he was exposed to sunlight, or unless he was hit by radiant damage, which is interesting because one of the 3 artifacts you have to find is a sun sword, which emits sunlight in a small radius. Right. So I could see that being a way to stop, like a boss fight mechanic to stop his self heal. The other part I'm interested about, like 2 more things actually. One is his ability called Children of the Night, where he calls in reinforcements. He calls in ads, and I want to see a boss fight with ads so bad again. Like, not just things you melt within seconds, but powerful ones. He can call in vampire spawns. He can call in powerful werewolves or swarms of bats, depending on what the DM rolled or what he decides to. But I want to see that. I want him to be able to call in reinforcements all the time, like on the regular.
What would be badass is that if he kills a player character, when they go back to the fire, they're actually replaced by, like a version of themselves. You know what I mean? Like how we have the illusion.
Oh yeah, that's
like, that would be pretty badass.
That was the 3rd thing I wanted to talk about.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
No. It's all fine. I like that we got to this. Got to the same conclusion. One of the main themes is if you die in Curse of Strahd, if Strahd kills you, he might eat you, he might kill you, he might also raise you as one of his vampire minions. And that's what I want to see. So if, again, yeah, as you said, if you respawn at the campfire, he will go over to your corpse where it lies. He will bite you, and it will spawn a version of you that is fighting against your own party, like an NPC-controlled version of yourself. And that should not be as weak as a paranoid delusion. It should actually be... it shouldn't have your actual stats, because that would be bonkers in the way how HP and damage is distributed. But it should not be an easy fight. So if you lose someone, that's even worse than losing someone who is, than in another fight. It should be worse than losing someone in the regular boss fight.
And he also had the stereotypical, by stereotypical, one of the normal, quote-unquote, vampire tropes that if you don't kill him in his coffin or kill him with sunlight, when he drops to, like, dead status, he disappears into a mist, and then, like, fades away, and you can hear him. So we may have to fight Strahd multiple times.
Yes. Talking about fighting him multiple times, let's talk about the Heart of Sorrow. The Heart of Sorrows is a giant ruby living heart made of crystal, that is placed in one of the spires of Castle Ravenloft. And essentially it functions as a damage sponge. Any damage Strahd would take, he can transfer to this heart. Until a certain threshold, until which the heart bursts and is destroyed. But to kill Strahd, players in the sourcebook, in the actual D&D adventure, and I could see them doing this in Neverwinter as well, would have to go there and take out this heart. Which is
first before
before actually confronting him, which is, I think, one of the things that players would then do in the endgame dungeon that is Castle Ravenloft.
That would be cool, like a side quest where you can go through the dungeon, quote unquote, normal, and you can fight Strahd, and he'll just have an extra super badass bonus that he doesn't take damage for extra time, and then until he does, and then it's supposed to the boss fight's a hell of a lot longer. But if you take the time to take the side quest to destroy like a mini boss type of style, like he has minions or you can fight him there, and then you have to go back through the Castle Ravenloft to the boss fight. Maybe it'll make the final fight feeder, so that way if people want to just gangbuster it and min-max and then hopefully just burn them down in one fight, they can do it. For like higher level people who can do it, but lower geared people, item level, would have the option to go destroy the Heart of Sorrow and then go to see him. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I like the idea of side quests. I mean, back in the day, we thought that like killing this extra boss in Melabox Castle would kind of enhance the drop rates of another boss. So that turned out to be not true at all. But I mean, I think it's interesting. Like if you can do side quests that help in boss fights or something like that, like you said,
it'd be cool.
It'd be cool, and even lower item levels could have an alternate way of like making the dungeon more manageable for them. So I like that.
It would just take longer, but it's still doable, which I think it would be pretty good. I mean, obviously implementation, I'm not sure technically how to do that, but conceptually I think it's a solid plot to explore.
Also coming back to the artifacts that you have to gather to fight Strahd, I'm really a fan of giving players distinct roles in fights. So if you need 3 artifacts, and we've talked about certain interrupts for his heal or whatever, I like that, for example, players could take the 3 artifacts, 1 artifact a player, and then fill distinct roles and have to do certain stuff or activate the artifacts at certain times in the fight. So I'd very much like to see that, because I think group play is defined by players filling specific roles and also add value to the fight other than like DPS. So I think that would be an interesting concept as well.
Yeah, similar to the second boss fight in Tomb of the Nine Gods, where
exactly. So you pick the curses and then you follow your role. I think I like stuff like that.
Yeah, but this time actually more because in Tomb of the Nine Gods, the only one of the buffs doesn't matter. The one who does more damage to the zombies, it doesn't matter really, and the other two, the only one who has to do something actively is the guy who will disable the balls.
Yeah, exactly. So you're right. So actually, only one of the buffs is really an active part, and the second one is just important because you do more damage. Yeah, that's correct. But I like the general structure.
We could see a better implementation of that concept, essentially.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I agree.
Which is, I think, would match the overall. Like, it would be a good, nice tie-in because you get told about those artifacts at the very beginning. You get told where they are in the story. You will find them, and then at the end you will actually use them. I think that's a nice tie-in to like actually round up the module. So, as for stories, or maybe heroic encounters, or maybe even a second dungeon or a skirmish or whatever, there's 3 more things I want to talk about, and one of them is the Ember Temple. The Ember Temple, which is essentially a place of forbidden knowledge, a house of the dark powers that helped Strahd get to his power. It's a sealed temple where players can find all kinds of crazy, dark, and forbidden lore. And it's one of the many places where you can find an artifact, if the cards said it's there. But it also is a nice location to have as, well, maybe a story instance, or a skirmish, or whatever. So that's Isn't
the Ember Temple also like nicknamed Total Party Kill Temple because you can go in at any level? Like part of the like module is like, oh, it's level 1. Oh, there's information here. Let's go over here and
it's quite tough. It's quite tough. I would say the hags are already like a TPK.
Pretty tough to start off with, yeah.
If you calculate it through an XP calculator, they're double deadly. Like for the group composition that will usually get in. You encounter those in D&D at 4th level. That's just absolutely ridiculous. 3 night hacks. But yeah, that's another thing. This realm is not easy. The fights are not easy. There's a lot of memorable and difficult encounters in the D&D module, and I want them to do this also in Neverwinter. So the Ember Temple, a couple of demi-liches, a couple of flying skulls, a couple of weird shit going on there. Actually, players can make a pact with the dark powers in themselves. It's one of the few ways to actually get turned into a lich, because that's not usually an option for players to do. Okay, I want to become a lich. There's not a ritual that says, all right, here's how you become a lich. No. There is one of the few places where players can actually become a lich themselves. Because that's usually reserved to NPCs.
Let's do it.
Yeah. With all the repercussions and all the advantages. I don't think they will... They won't do permanent transformation in Neverwinter, but just so you get a taste for the scope of powers that players might discover in the Ember Temple. The second one is Argunvost Hold, which is the residence, or the former residence, of an order of knights in the Valley of Barovia that was defeated by Strahd, and that had as their leader a dragon, a silver dragon, who was slain by Strahd, and the ghosts of those knights and the dragon still haunt Barovia because they cannot get to rest.
Right.
Ravenloft
That's a note on how badass Strahd is. He killed a silver dragon.
Yeah, he killed a silver dragon. And
solo.
Yeah. Ravenloft is so isolated from the rest of the world that even in death, their souls cannot escape this land. So we will see, I hope we will see, the revenants of those fallen knights. And
that'd be cool.
Yeah, because they cannot defeat Strahd in the current form, but they cannot rest until Strahd is defeated, so they're driven mad. And actually talk.
And they're not
them.
like happy mad that like, oh, by the way, guys, we're here to kill Strahd. You want to help us? They're like, no.
Yeah, they will attack essentially anything on sight unless you approach them carefully or talk them down or whatever. And that's one of the another places I want to see them doing as like heroic encounters or another skirmish. Because if players in Neverwinter hear more heroic encounters, they usually go like, boo, like that's not something you want. But in this case, if it's not a ridiculous grind, I can see a lot of potential for actually really interesting and distinct heroic encounters, because it's not just, all right, here's a different monster, it looks different, it has different attacks, and it has HP that you have to take down. No, the hack encounters, the stuff in the Ember Temple, the people from Argynvost Hold, and the third thing I want to talk about, those could actually be really interesting. Like, this is the first module that could get heroic encounters right, in my opinion.
We can hope.
Oh, I doubt that, but I'm interested what you have to say.
Oh, Josh, the eternal optimist.
Yeah.
Purely from a narrative point of view and purely from the monsters that you encounter, it's quite different than just, all right, here's a bunch of bandits that will attack a caravan or whatever you constantly see as a heroic encounter. I actually can see them doing some really interesting stuff. The third thing is the Yester Hill, the Druids of Yester Hill, which there's all kinds of crazy people in this domain, and some of them even came to a coven of druids came to the conclusion that because they're druids, they really like nature and they like the forces of nature, and because Strahd commands nature and everything really in this realm, they came to the conclusion, yeah, he's kind of our god now, and they started worshipping Strahd and doing all kinds of,
he's our friend.
Yeah, all kinds of fucked up shit. And in the 5th edition module, they're busy tending to an evil tree that's corrupting the lands, and a tree blight, essentially an Ent. Think Lord of the Rings. A giant evil Ent that is going to walk through the countryside, like massive, walk through the countryside.
This one's on the side of Sauron.
Yeah, and lay waste to everything. And that's one of the most memorable encounters in the D&D book. And I hope it will also be really interesting in the actual game, because it's a massive meat shield that is tended to by berserkers and all kinds of druids who can do all kinds of crazy magic. So that's another one where
you all make him like give him the HR Thorn Groot's ability. Yay! Everyone has it.
Oh no. Oh no. Best as a hunter ranger myself, I say, oh no.
Fair point.
So like those are kind of the places that I would like to see in the story at some point.
Yeah, and like Ravenloft is so iconic. I mean, anyone who has played D&D, I would say, for any decent length of time, like more than one campaign, or has played D&D outside of Neverwinter itself, the PC game, or Xbox, PS4, or whatever, PC Masters. Ravenloft is iconic. I think it would be arguably the most iconic setting overall.
Yeah, probably. I would think so. I mean, with everyone that I've talked, all were really excited when they heard that there's a possibility of Ravenloft.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think this is what many D&D folks could be interested in. And also, I think what's fascinating about Ravenloft is also for the devs, it's a whole new campaign setting. And just like Jay said, I mean, the possibilities are endless. So they can really go out and do whatever. They have all possibilities because it's a completely new setting. And I'm really, really interested what they are going to do.
Yeah.
So one thing that I was thinking about, like how people might be like, how's Ravenloft going to tie into Neverwinter? Why would, they be here when, we've already fought a bunch of great evils. Like, one of the things is that Neverwinter was built off of 4th edition D&D in mind. I believe that's the way the mechanics, the encounters,
Yes.
the dailies, and the at wills.
Exactly.
Knowing that, I believe in 4th edition, Ravenloft was part of like the realm of the Dread or something Dread, and that's actually part of the Shadowfell.
Yes.
And as we all know from playing Neverwinter, the Shadowfell is prominent. So somehow I would suspect that the Shadowfell will be a transition in where Ravenloft is like a zone within the Shadowfell, but a special one, obviously. Like more of like the Shadowfell's prison where the badasses go.
Yeah. The Domains of Dread, which Ravenloft is one of them.
That's what it is.
They spawn out of the Shadowfell. If there is a great deed of great evil, which Strahd did, he murdered he murdered a lot of people, not only Sergei and Tatiana.
Right.
So for us, in the end, Barovia Ravenloft will be an adventure map on our overworld map. Like, it will be an icon on our overworld map. We will get there. I don't know how we will be introduced to the setting story wise, but we will get there, and it has so much potential to be different from previous modules, simply because of the atmosphere. It has a different adventure structures than the usual classic D&D module, and I think it gives Neverwinter the chance to do something really good. Like, it gives the devs to do something amazing for once, I would say.
And I hope
that's what I was referring to. Yeah, sorry, Kolat, go on.
Oh, I just want to jump. Like, it gives them the opportunity to actually let their freak flag fly in the sense of like they can do like dark things, like really set a tone with it. And one thing that I'd love to give them credit for, they've always, at least in my mind, been very good about the lore for whatever zone they're doing. Like, I love reading like the lore that you collect and stuff, and this one gives them so much to work with, like you guys have been saying. Sorry, Josh, for interrupting. Go ahead, buddy.
No problem. I mean, that's what I wanted to say as well. I mean, this is really, that's what I was referring to. Like, the devs really have a chance to do something new here, because Ravenloft is a completely new setting. And I also agree on the lore. This is such an underrated fact of the game. I mean, if you're really interested in D&D, then you can really dig into the lore that the game is handing out and recognize a lot of the stuff that you know from your pen and paper adventures. And this is really an underrated aspect of the game. I completely agree.
Yeah, and also, if you look at how Mod 12 evolved and sort of like really improved the visuals of the game, like the jungle the atmosphere was well captured and it was well made. That makes me excited for how they will do the horror atmosphere and thematic settings of Curse of Strahd. So, closing words. One thing I'd like to also mention is I couldn't find the exact quotes anywhere, but I remember one of the devs saying they want to do more with the D&D live shows, like Critical Role or Acquisitions Incorporated, which they already did once with the Day of the Dungeon Master. The April Fool's event is based on one of the Acquisitions Incorporated live D&D live shows. It's hilarious. It's actually really fun, even for non-D&D players. You should definitely check it out. One of the things that is really interesting about Curse of Strahd is because Chris Perkins, who is a lead story designer, I don't know the exact position, but he's a lead designer for Dungeons and Dragons, who is the Dungeon Master for Acquisitions Incorporated, has his own D&D live series on Twitch, Dice Camera Action, and they have played through Curse of Strahd. And one of the characters in there, Strix, has canonically lived in Barovia for 50 years. And I really hope we will see her, because that could make for a really interesting encounter, to see one of the characters of the D&D live show in there, because
yeah, that'd be really cool.
Especially if they actually let like Holly Conrad, who plays Strix, a tiefling sorceress, if they actually let her voice her that would be amazing too. Like, yeah,
I'd appreciate the little touches like that.
That's one of the things. Like, and canonically, she's a witch. Like, she lives there for 50 years until she gets enough power to resurrect her dead party that Strahd killed. Sorry, spoiler alert for everyone watching the series. I'm sorry. Okay, that was my bad. But she's a witch living in the woods essentially. And I would like
the witch.
Yes. She's fire resistant, so that doesn't really help. She's a tiefling.
You just add more firewood, dude. You overcome the resistance. She's not immune. It takes longer.
Oh, finally, Control Wizards, Master of Flames will have a place in the game. Again, yes.
Someone call Sharp Edge.
Yeah,
tell them to get a new build. Get ready.
Yeah, the witch
the
burner.
Fire build.
The witch burner. That's so offensive. Oh god, no.
That'd be great. Like, if they do that for Master of Fire, Sharp would be super happy. And then if they sped up Scourge Warlock animations, I'd be happy. It's like win-win.
Great.
All right. Okay.
Good deal.
I think we're done now. I think that's
Sounds
a wrap.
good to me, man. Pleasure.
Yeah,
Thanks
it was
again,
really
people.
nice.
Maybe once we get more information, if our if what we think is coming is actually true, and once we get to see more details about the module, I'd like to invite you again and talk about specifics. Maybe if we already know parts of the story, if we already know parts of the locations, so we can go more into detail of what players might expect.
Absolutely.
Well, I like talking as much as memes and gifs, so I might be able to find time.
All right. Perfect. Okay.
Yeah, I'm also. Let's do this more often. It was a pleasure.
Sure.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you guys. If there's any way you want to be contacted or any social media information or whatever, I will put it in the video description so you can find it there.
All right.
Other than that, I'd like to say goodbye and thank you for watching.
Yeah, thanks for listening and watching and whatever.
Thanks for rocking out, people. Peace.
Bye-bye.